Okay, we are here live in Las Vegas at Snowflake Summit, and I'm very excited to welcome a very special guest, Matt Turck, a man who needs no introduction. We all know you from your data landscape blog series and the amazing meetup series you have in New York. Matt, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
In this hotel room with like this nice light in the back.
Yeah.
Nice mirror.
Yeah, I think one of the tidbits from Snowflake Summit Live is the Wi-Fi is spotty. So we thought, what's a more stable way to do a live stream than getting a suite at the link right nearby? Yeah. So Matt, how are you enjoying the show so far?
I'm loving it. I gotta say, Snowflake has done an incredible job turning this event into pretty much what feels like the watering hole of the entire data industry. It sort of feels like everybody that's working in the modern data stack or machine learning and AI seems to be here. And it's really great. And also it feels very nice to get to see old friends and then meet a lot of people that actually knew from like Twitter or LinkedIn and meet them in real life. So it's been fantastic. I love the energy and the sort of like optimism about the entire space.
Yeah, and just speaking about your history, can you give everyone a background on your what you've done in the past and what you're working on these days?
Yeah, sure. So I've been basically in the data industry one way or another for many years now. At some point, I was the co-founder of an enterprise search startup that basically was an AI startup that we ran for like 5 years, venture-backed and all the things, and was eventually acquired by Oracle. So I was in the world of like unstructured data, and then I joined Oracle as part of the acquisition, and I was in the world of like structured data and databases. And then I helped start Bloomberg Ventures, Michael Bloomberg's sort of like venture arm. And then I was in the world of financial data. So very naturally, when I became a VC and joined FirstMark now 9 years ago, I very naturally gravitated towards the emerging world of what was known as big data at the time. And that's been one of my core investment thesis over the last few years.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the term big data. How do you think we've evolved since the three V's? We had velocity, variety, volume.
Yes.
Do you think that we've addressed that by now?
It came up in the conversations and presentations still today. So I mean, that's the beauty of the whole data ecosystem, right? So it's sort of the gift that keeps on giving, and like every few years, it's like a reinvention. So we went from the sort of like old data warehouses to like Hadoop, and then from like Hadoop to arguably cloud services, and sort of like away from cloud services into like more like Snowflake, and then like the modern data stack. So like every few years, like keeps changing. It's always fun.
Yeah. No mention of map-reduced jobs here at Snowflake Summit, right?
Surprisingly, very few.
Yeah. I remember those old Strata shows where everyone was just going around figuring out how to get their map-reduced jobs to work and not fail. And but I think that's one of the innovations we've seen, Snowflake bring to the market, and many other vendors who have, done a lot of stuff in the cloud. How do you see that continuing to evolve over the next few years?
The ecosystem, or
the data ecosystem in the cloud specifically.
Yeah, look, it's a super interesting question and a low one to answer. So it sort of feels like with that modern data stack, we have like something that's promising and kind of stable for now, where like all the little bits sort of like interoperate. So I think that's interesting. At the same time, the modern data stack right now is like a happy family where there's there's like the big guys in the middle, Snowflake certainly, but GCP, Azure, and then there's like all those little startups around. And for now, like everybody's friendly because like everybody does their little bit in the stack. But at some point, for those companies to really grow into big platforms, multi-billion-dollar public companies, they're going to have to expand their offerings. So like at some point, I think people are going to start like, competing with one another. So that's going to be interesting to watch. And then there's emerging questions around, well, it's kind of nice to have like all these little bits in the parts of the modern data stack, but it's starting to get expensive once you add up like this vendor plus that vendor plus Snowflake plus other things, which is like another reason why we may evolve towards, at least from the consumer perspective, like a strong desire for like platforms and, not like a string of like best of breed solutions.
Yeah, I've seen it go multiple directions. Some people are saying, hey, I don't want to use 10 tools for the same use case. And on this other side, I don't want too much consolidation because then you get into vendor lock-in. So it seems like we might have to balance that somehow. Yeah.
And then the other big thing that like everybody's talking about here, it seems, is the data mesh, which is this super interesting concept. And so it's very funny. Like everybody seems to be trying to position, for or against the data mesh, or is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Is it marketing? Is that and is that a technology? Is that a series of like tools and processes and people? So that's been a really interesting thing.
Yeah. Do you have a strong opinion on data mesh?
Yeah, I mean, it seems very natural to me that people would want decentralization. I mean, you don't want a complete mess, but different teams have different needs. So, like, look, of course, you don't want to end up with like 22 different databases because if I think the modern data stack is complicated as it is, like you don't want to have like 20 different replicas of the modern data stack within one company. But like, so within reason, I think it makes perfect sense that people ultimately should own their data product and the processes that are related. It's always the same thing. It's a bit of an ebb and flow. There's like bundling and unbundling, centralization, decentralization, and you go in one direction and you overcorrect to the other direction, and eventually you get to somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one of the things I had a recent episode of our podcast with Bruno Aziza, and he had some great insights on data mesh as well. And I think we're seeing it get more adoption in the enterprise and demystifying it. I think the book is a really good resource that kind of removes all the ambiguity to a certain extent as much as you can. Of course, when you try to implement it in your environment, it's a bit different. But yeah, I think that is one of the areas we're going in terms of building data products with the end user in mind, the use case, and also as like a microservice that's decoupled and kind of self-sustaining. Where you're not relying on, hey, one of my consumers goes down, I'm not bringing down the whole pipeline. Right? I'm not killing all analytics in my company, just like one broker went down. So,
and then Snowflake seems to be positioning sort of in favor of the data mesh, which is sort of interesting because they're ultimately like they will make a lot of money, more money if they centralize and all the data like ends up in Snowflake. But they're sort of, if I understood correctly, making the positioning saying, well, actually with the data exchange, we could still be the sort of like overall ecosystem. So you could live in the Snowflake ecosystem while still achieving the objectives of data mesh, which I think is interesting. So again, like everybody's trying to figure it out, and I think that's super interesting.
Are you going to add a data mesh category to your blog post?
To my annual data landscape. Last year I actually changed the name. So like I've been doing this annual data landscape for 10 years now. I guess this year is going to be the 10th year. And last year, we changed it to, we called it the MAD landscape, like for machine learning, AI, and data, which I think perfectly captures like the sort of explosion of that ecosystem. And we long ran out of little boxes to put those logos, and we have a very long database, like an Airtable database, where we have like all the vendors that we couldn't put. But like the data mesh is like it's impossible to categorize all this by definition. So
it's all of the above or neither.
Yes, exactly. We'll have to figure it out.
Yeah. We met at the Airbyte event last night over at the Venetian. I have to give John Smith from Stream a shout out for making the connection. Thanks, John. He's also making sure the pod is running smoothly. But it was a cool event. We were talking about how maybe you can have a subscription offering for that annual letter where if you don't pay, you just have to use a magnifying glass.
Yes.
If you do pay, you get the Zoom functionality, which is really,
that's a genius idea. Like I should have thought of that this a long time ago.
Yeah, and that's where we're getting to, where there's so many vendors, so many logos, so many people trying to solve the problem. So how do you recommend, like as a data engineer, how do you kind of cut through kind of I wouldn't call it confusion, but maybe there's some saturation in terms of a lot of vendors in similar categories.
Oh, for sure. And, it's actually it's been one of the really fun things being at this Snowflake event. It's like in some ways walking the floor is like the IRL version of that data landscape. Just like walk from like one booth to the other, and even for somebody like me who spends so much of their time in the space, there's like so many vendors like I've never heard of, and so I go to their booth and like watch a demo so I know where to put them and have like a mental model where that all fits. But no, it's crazy, and it's a little bit of an explosion, and it's super confusing for sure. But I think ultimately the only way to figure it out is to do the work and come to events like this Snowflake Summit and just explore and try and have an open mind. And we're a few years away from having like super obvious solution where like everybody says, okay, well, this company has won the market. Unfortunately, no silver bullet. You have to just go for it and spend the time, and you really have to, because a lot of those emerging vendors are substantially better than the better known names or slightly older product. And it's truly something very magical and very important that has been happening in the data infrastructure world for the last 2 or 3 years. So you have to spend time learning about those new products.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, as we continue to see more vendors come into the space, we'll also see some consolidation. And you also run a really good meetup series in New York City. Would you mind telling us about that?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's a labor of love. It's called Driven NYC, and it's a meetup I started on a whim, again, about 10 years ago, largely because I was at Bloomberg at the time and I had access to a room. And it sort of hit a nerve in the New York community at that time because, unlike San Francisco, there just weren't a lot of like meetups talking about those things. And, the first event, I thought I was going to have like 10 people. It was going to be like a round table for friends, and I had like 30. And then the next event, I thought I was going to have 30, and then I had like 80. And the event after that, we had to like move to a different room. And look, for many years, I could never find a room in New York that was large enough to accommodate the number of people that wanted to join that thing. We had a 500-person auditorium for a while, and there were still hundreds of people on the wait list. So it was like this high energy kind of like community, super fun. Certainly COVID made it a bit harder, so we moved to Zoom. But thankfully, we just switched back to in person last week. Yeah, we had Tristan from DBT and also the folks at Estuary.dev, which is one of my portfolio companies. Kick us off, and it's just so great to be back in person. But we at FirstMark, like, we big believers in the power of networks and communities and just getting people together and like learning and sort of like geeking out, and then drinking afterwards. Drinking before, which I learned many years ago. That's the secret to like all successful meetups and events, like the drinking part happening before.
I see. Yeah, as long as you don't start the drinking part too soon before. Well, hey, we'd love to be at the next one. Definitely want to stop by. Great to see in-person events happening today. And I think that every single person I've come across at this event is so happy to see people's faces. And we've been a lot of people that you met over Zoom, and been talking to for a year. Great to just like run into them. When's the next meetup that you're excited about?
July 23rd for Driven NYC, and then we'll continue doing online events as well, because a little bit like this, sort of like live recording, but then like we post them. We have a YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and search for Driven NYC, you'll see the entire library of videos. And because we've been doing this for 10 years, we have like 375 speakers on it, and like all the big names in the space. So it's again, our community. It's just like fun to get together. It's fun to learn from the best people, and then as we have a vibrant community, we are able to attract the better speakers, who in turn attract a great audience, and it's been really cool.
Very cool. If I have to put you on the spot, is there one big prediction you can make for the data industry over the next year?
I think, I don't know if that's a very positive prediction, but, I think at a macro level, I think we all need to be sort of careful. I'm a VC, so I'm coming at it from a startup perspective. But the world has drastically changed in a matter of like a few weeks, and although that was months and years in the making. So I think, all the data startups need to be doing what a lot of other startups are doing. So being very smart, very focused on cash and having their burn in check, because there's like this pressure to consolidate from a functional perspective, which is what we were talking about a few minutes ago, where like eventually customers are going to want a unified platform that do lots of different things, I think. And then there is a separate like macro headwind around hey, if you're a little startup and you need to be careful if you want to raise your next round of money. So like the combination of those two things, I think is really pushing the industry towards consolidation, like in the right way or the wrong way. So either it's like happy events of like partnerships or great acquisitions, but probably a fair amount of failure. So that's my prediction for the next year or two, which, by the way, very cynically and looking at it coldly, is probably not the worst thing, because there's so many companies, right, that's popped up in the last couple of years. Like I don't know if the world needs 27 data catalog companies and 18 data quality companies, and those are fantastic categories, but that's the reality of those categories right now.
Yeah. Hopefully at some point your yearly newsletter will be human readable with the logos. I know you're struggling to find designers who can work.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I have a lot of friends in this industry, and it's a lot of smart people doing great things, and I really want everyone to succeed, even though I'm an investor. And sometimes I have like investments that compete directly with a lot of the companies. So like a little bit of the community thing. That's really how I approach the ecosystem as something that's super fascinating to me, and I love a lot of those companies. So I basically don't want anybody to fail or get in trouble, but that's almost mechanically going to happen.
I think that's why we're seeing a kind of a new bit of energy focused on making sure that your data initiatives are bringing positive ROI and business values. There's been some really good writing on that as of recently. Even like Bill Inman, one of the fathers of data warehousing, kind of chiming in on the state of cloud data warehousing and making sure that you're building your models with a specific business purpose and you're getting ROI out of them. Because I think having a data swamp, as some people are calling it, can be exorbitantly expensive, and ultimately people will ask, well, what's the purpose of this?
So the good news on that front is that I think we are actually at that level in the overall deployment. So the usual data hierarchy of needs. For many years we were trying to do stuff at the top, but we didn't have the bottom. So like I think like everybody has seen this, right? At the bottom you got storage and like processing, and at the top you got like super cool AI stuff, right? And like Monica Rogati has like a version of this. Several people I think have a version of this. But anyway, in that triangle, this hierarchy of data needs, for many years, like the bottom effectively was not really properly addressed, and that's the beauty of Snowflake, right? It's one of the key solutions that has enabled people to put their data house in order. And that really happened, sort of like 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19. And then that all other wave of like applications, including data applications, like running on top of Snowflake. And those, to me, are the most likely to deliver ROI. So it'd be really bad if this moment in the economic cycle that happened as people were trying to implement Snowflake. But I think there's a lot of people that have already implemented Snowflake and have started implementing and deploying solutions on top of Snowflake, and those are the ones that really drive the benefit. So like the timing for the data industry of that kind of like recession, which is started, with this recession which is starting to happen, is actually not terrible. I think the data industry in general is going to be able to prove that all that time and investment and effort and those conferences and everything actually amounts to something very tangible.
Yeah. And, the product that we work on here, Change Data Capture into streams into Snowflake, that, stream delivers. I mean, we've been hearing similar feedback from our customers that, building more applications on top of Snowflake that are focused on operational use cases that actually deliver back to the business. Like I was talking to one customer who was like, hey, if this pipeline to Snowflake goes down, or if there's any outage on Snowflake, our inventory systems, our billing, our shipping, our fulfillment are going down. So I think, to your point, there is so much economic value being developed on top of Snowflake that it should hold up during a recession and continue to grow, perhaps at less of a feverish pace, but still at a healthy pace.
Yeah, which is not the worst thing, like meant to like slow down the pace a little bit. And by the way, you guys are in a very important part of the ecosystem. You were asking me for predictions. Like that's one of the many sort of predictions I have, which is like, finally the time of like real-time data is arriving. It's really something that people have been talking about for the last, I don't know how many years. Like every year was like, okay, this year is the time of like real-time data. This year, actually it didn't happen, but this year is the year of real-time data, right? Like at some point, I think it's bit by bit becoming true. So I think that's a really good part of the ecosystem to play in. But like applications are what it's all about. Ultimately, it's not about like cool data engineering. I'm seeing tons of actual use cases and ROI. So not to be the VC that like promotes their data, their investments. But,
please do.
Okay. Well, I'm a very proud investor and on the board at Dataiku, which by the way
very successful
just
company.
won the Partner of the Year for Machine Learning and AI at this event at the Snowflake conference. And so what they do is they are an enterprise platform for the deployment of data science, machine learning, and AI in the enterprise. It's really been the question of AI is cool, but like, what do you actually do with it? And I think there was certainly a period of time where customers needed to like wrap their mind around, okay, this is not descriptive analytics. That's not the world of BI. It's a different world. And what does it enable us to do? And I think we're very much at the stage now where like there's a lot of the market that understands, okay, well, this is, fraud prediction, pricing, like all sorts of like different applications of AI, which are very sort of like common and not just completely out of this world. So I think just from the vantage point of being on the board of Dataiku, I see that exactly what we're saying, that the world of data has moved towards deploying at scale in production applications that deliver a very clear ROI to the business side. So I think we are at that stage of the market, which again is like sort of the timing of this kind of a recession, which was bound to happen at some point, for the ecosystem is not that bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And even speaking of streaming, Snowflake had their streaming announcement today, and we just had some demos around that. So I think that, and and when Snowflake does it, it's driven by, they have a massive sample size of customers, and that was one of the feedback we got, which is hey, the ingest is the bottleneck into Snowflake, and now that they're supporting that, and I think you're going to see other warehouses and cloud support that as a first class citizen, and then AI ML is blowing up, and Dataiku always been a very impressive company, and seeing them continue to evolve is going to be very exciting. Well, Matt, I know you're a very busy person, so we appreciate you joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
This is great. I hope we can stay in touch, and we'd love to check out the next meetup in New York City.
Absolutely, Driven NYC. Very cool.
Great. Thank you. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. We're live from Snowflake Summit, the Link Hotel right next to the event space, and hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you.